Hey FCF, we're continuing our study through the book of Ephesians, and we've gotten into these relational passages now, starting in Ephesians 5, now we're in Ephesians 6, and what I said I'm going to say again. God puts us into these relational context that we can learn to push off our self-absorption and selfishness and learn to love the way God himself loves unselfishly. When you get married, you are forced to learn unselfishness. When you have children, you now are forced to learn even more unselfishness. You have to give yourself, devote yourself to the children. Now, another context that God is going to introduce in Ephesians, we're going to look at now, is employer-employee relationships, the vocational realm. And the vocational realm also gives us an opportunity to be stripped of our selfishness and self-absorption. We have to learn to cooperate. We have to learn to work together with others. And this is a good thing. So in this context, we have to understand the New Testament was written, the Roman Empire was in dominance, and there were huge numbers of people that were slaves to Rome. When Rome would conquer a country, multitudes of people. You could be a lawyer, you could be butcher, baker, candlestick maker, but you would become a slave overnight. Now, Roman slavery was not always the brutal kind of slavery that we remember from America's, history and so forth. Nevertheless, it could be. But we're going to read about vocational instruction in the context of slavery and masters. We have to understand this was the first century context. This was normative then, but we need to apply it now to employee-employer relationships. Okay, here we go. Ephesians 6 verse 5. Slaves, we think employee. You're thinking, yeah, I am a slave. Slaves, obey your earthly masters or your bosses, your supervisors, with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. This is huge. It's saying that don't see that boss, and even in the Roman Empire days, don't see that slave master. See Christ and serve and submit to that boss, that supervisor, whatever, in the same way we would serve and submit to Christ. See Christ, don't see the imperfect human. It goes on in verse 6, it says, obey them, not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not men, because you know that because you know that the Lord will reward everyone, for whatever good he does, whether he is slave or free. So we'll pause there. So we see the same notion. Regardless of who your boss is, your employer is, regardless of what their attitude is like, what their personality is like, whether they're fair, whether they're unfair, whether they're coarse and harsh or kind and gentle. And it says, don't see them, but for the sake of the kingdom of God, in essence, you be the best worker that they can have. You see Christ. You serve them, not seeing them, not seeing the way they treat you, but seeing that you are actually serving Christ. Give it your best. Give it 100%. Don't let our performance be conditioned on their conduct, their character, their behavior, but let our performance be based on the fact that Christ is the one we are giving service to. He sees, he will reward in time. We may not be compensated, remunerated, we may not be cared for the way that we deserve by our efforts in this life. Don't let that get to you. Don't let that eat at you. And I watch people do this all the time in the work context. You've got to keep your eyes on the fact that you are serving Christ. He sees your efforts, he sees your sincerity, and he promises you will be rewarded in time. And it will be far better than the reward that we would gain from our temporal bosses, supervisors, and so forth. So this is a game changer. Let me tell you, I've experienced this. I was in the construction realm for a lot of years, so 17 years to be accurate. And 10 of those years, I was a follower of Christ and did not want to be there. Wanted very much to serve God in full time. capacity and so forth. But nevertheless, I learned this principle to give 100% every day. It didn't matter what my supervisors were like, what they thought of me, what they said to me, how they treated me. But I recognized I was serving Christ, and that changed the dynamic. It literally improved my attitude. It improved my my experience. I wouldn't go so far as to say I totally enjoyed the work, but I had a more joy in the work than what I had had before. I really believe this in my heart. I believe that you can be in the worst working circumstance imaginable, with the worst boss imaginable, but if you will put this principle in place, that you are there to serve Christ, and you know that He has His eye on you each day, and He will absolutely reward you for your faithfulness. I think that not only will you do better as an employee, but you'll do better as a human being, and you'll start to have a lot more peace, a lot more enthusiasm, and maybe even some joy in these less than ideal work circumstances with less than ideal bosses that we may have to sit under for many years. Okay. Hope this helps. Thank you.